Right, for an in-depth analysis of President Tinubu's speech and Democracy Day in Nigeria, we're joined now by Professor Okey, Ikechukwu, Leadership and Governance Consultant. And in our off-site studio is Mahmud, Jega, Rise Analyst. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for joining us on Newsnight tonight, and happy Democracy Day. Okay, so let me start with you, Prof. Ikechukwu. I mean, is it a question of how democracy has fared in Nigeria, or how Nigerians have fared under democracy in the last 26 years? And how reassuring would you say President Tinubu's Democracy Day address in the Green Chamber, especially when he says no to one-party state, and of course, I'm not going to help opposition, fix their issues?
Yeah, it's a combination of how Nigeria has fared under democracy and how democracy has fared under the kind of politics and politicians we have today. Looking back in the last 25 years, we've seen a lot of things. But what we're seeing on the table today, I think some of the contradictions everybody is complaining about were all foreseen. Now, going to the speech before I come back to this, he touched on key issues. He honored some Nigerians. Some of them, the honor has been long overdue. People in particular like Kudirat, Humphrey Wosu, among others. That is one. As for the comment on one-party state, I think there are distinctions we need to make. When you set up a political party, that party is supposed to be made up of people who share the same ideology. So destabilization forces from outside can only arise out of several considerations. One, lack of internal cohesion. Two, desperation for power without a focus on what to do with power, etc. So if you say, let's even assume that it's true that they're striving for a one-party state. In every political party, you also have internal wranglings, such that sometimes when you say a party is in power, it's actually one division of the party that's in power. Now, the speech, Democracy Day. What really is Democracy Day? The day Abiola won an election, or the day of the annulment? No. That election was the vote of confidence of Nigerians, as Nigerians. The two candidates were Muslims. Abiola got votes from all over the federation. His opponent, chief opponent, Tofa, lost in his own area. And so we're not celebrating the fact that there was an election, but that on that day of the election, with the result of that election, Nigerians remembered or thought of themselves as Nigerians. They voted for a man they believed is a Nigerian who would be in their interest. Nobody thought of where he came from. Nobody thought of any other thing other than, let's go and choose a man we want to be our president. And when you also talk about the annulment, let's not make the mistake of forgetting that it was a few individuals who held certain perspectives about the candidate himself that drove the annulment. The other element that's usually overlooked is we don't ever stop to ask ourselves, to what extent did Abiola himself contribute to the annulment? But these are matters, if you like us to take on, because we must explore all the issues connected with it. There are internal dynamics that contributed to that annulment from the perspective of, one, his relationship with the military, two, his temperament, three, his interventions in the international space. But I don't know whether you have time for that, because that brings the core, that will bring out the question of how come it became irreversible, either from internal, external, international pressure, or from anywhere. There are interests that felt the need to sustain that annulment. So let's not keep pretending that it was those in power, just one or two individuals. No, it could have been reversed. If not that the interests against it were dominant. But it was not the interest of Nigerians. Interesting perspective there, Professor Ikechukwu.
Let me bring in Mahmud Jega into the conversation. Mahmud Jega, it was a 45 minutes long speech by the president today. How would you assess the core message of the president? Did it strike the right tone and balance between celebration and accountability? What did you make of the speech?
I think the most important elements in the president's address were, in particular, his pledge that he will not walk towards a one-party state, even though he qualified that by saying it will amount to malpractice if the APC were to shut its doors to those who are want to come in. And he did say, a bit jokingly, that he is not unhappy if there is chaos in the opposition parties. That is okay. I mean, it is not his responsibility to prop up the opposition parties. And very importantly for this time, he also said that he is not the one who is stopping INEC from registering new political parties. That is very important because it's one of the topical issues today, that we had 100 applications, and so far the Electoral Commission has not taken steps to register a new parties, which will help the opposition, especially the coalition they are planning to come together. Otherwise, most of the rest of the speech, he reeled out the major thrust of the administration, and also all those honors that he awarded to those who fought in the June 12th struggle. So on the whole, it was a good speech, I believe. It didn't cause much stir anywhere. And those two assurances that he gave, I hope we will begin to see them in real practice.
Let me bring it back to you, Prof. Still on the president's speech. He says, let me quote him, "I am happy the opposition is in disarray." On a democracy day, would you say is the time and the place, you know, to make such statements? I mean, how much weight does that even carry? And on the issue of democracy, Nigeria's democracy so far, would you say there are more of accidental heroes? Because I saw a piece that talked about, you know, Nigeria's democracy without Democrats. See how you can unpack all of this.
Well, the first question about the president being happy that the opposition is in disarray. You see, the democratic enterprise requires you to make a case for yourself, gather members based on an ideology, and take steps to sustain yourself. It is in the democratic spirit to say that I'm happy the opposition is in disarray. It boils down to the fact that you're not putting yourself together sufficiently and strongly enough to give me a good fight. Clearly, I'm glad Mahmud used the humorous expression that it will be a malpractice. So, you see, the purpose of an opposition is not to help the government in power to succeed or to look good. The business of a government in power is to endeavor that it remains in power. Therefore, is a constant and continuous contestation over which you cannot begin to moralize that, oh, you know, if he's putting you in disarray, what's your capacity? What's the level of cohesion? How much conviction do your members have? Those are the issues to put on the table. The opposition is, okay, what would you say? Now, the opposition has also been given press releases over time, pointing out certain things he doesn't agree with. If I'm in opposition and you say, hey, you're hitting the government too hard, I will tell you it's my business to hit the government. So I see nothing. I think we should take that in good taste, laugh about it, but actually factually correct. It's not the business of one party to help another to win an election when he has interest in that election. That's the thing on the table. There was the other second point you raised.
Yes.
About, I'm sure I lost that.
I lost it too, but yeah. Speaking of which, I mean, I was asking whether it's the right, you know, time and place for that, but I think you've already addressed.
All right, so back to Mahmud Jega. What was missing in that speech for you? And I asked because we are beginning to see reactions. For instance, Senator Sarake Dixon says it was a missed golden opportunity for the president not to mention Rivers State, where he had declared a state of emergency earlier in the year. I mean, if you're marking Democracy Day, then that tipping point in Rivers State and emergency rule should have been mentioned today. I wonder what you think of that. Also, the president said he's not here to make anybody happy politically, and he welcomed public criticism. But is that a mark of confidence, or does it risk sounding dismissive to public frustrations and the voices of dissent?
Honestly, I think Senator Dixon was right, because the most controversial thing that happened in the democratic journey in the last 2 years, and probably, in fact, in the last decade or more, was the imposition of the state of emergency in Rivers State and the suspension of the governor and the state assembly, we haven't probably had the last of that issue because some PDP-controlled states took the matter to the Supreme Court. I'm personally surprised that the Supreme Court did not accelerate hearing on that matter because there are grave constitutional issues involved in that. And I agree, as I said, with Senator Dixon, that when we are celebrating the Democratic March and saying all the achievements and the gains, honestly, it would have been important to say something about that particular episode. Probably try to justify it in one way or another because it was probably the biggest blotch on the democratic journey so far.
And what did you think was missing in this in the speech for you? I also asked you about when the president expresses confidence to say, I'm not here to make you happy. After all, he doesn't sell ice cream. We must speak the fact. He's not here to make you happy. But do you think that could be misconstrued by critics and opposition who feel that he must also take into cognizance the voices of dissent?
I cannot remember that particular statement, but obviously it is the responsibility of the administration to make the citizens that elected it as happy as possible. We understand that certain difficult measures, socio-economic policy measures that are taken might be painful, and but really, I mean, the bottom line is if citizens are not happy with the policies of the administration, then the chances are that they will throw it out in the next election. So I don't know whether that was the context in which the president put it, right. But definitely it should be the aim of the administration to make citizens as happy as possible.
Okay, Prof, before we wrap, I mean, speaking of, you know, the voters and making citizens happy, let's talk about the kernel of democracy, the electoral process, the welfare of the people, and of course, you know, the fact that democracy should deliver on good governance, justice, and development. Needless to ask, you know, how we fared on those scores. How can we deepen, number one, the electoral process and, you know, ensure that truly this democracy, you know, gives us the dividends, the much talked about dividends of democracy?
Before you talk about deepening the electoral process, we must also talk about deepening the political process. The steps political parties can take in this regard is to actually begin to function at the right levels. Since after the election, I don't think you've heard of any party having a rally. You've not heard of regular meetings. So specific suggestions in this regard. At the ward level, parties should cause their ward leadership to meet with the members, move it to the council, move on to local government such that you have party activities at all times. It will drive membership. Also, it will also drive understanding of democracy, because sometimes when we speak of dividends of democracy, people are thinking, if you like, stomach infrastructure. And I want to recontextualize the notion of making people happy. Right. That is not to express support one way or another for what the president has said, but my understanding is that there's a difference between what you need and what you desire and what you want. All of us are parents. If in the morning on a Monday the child is dropped off for school, the child wants to stay and watch Tom and Jerry in the house, the parent knows the child needs to go to school. Right. So sometimes policies, nasty policies, are needs. And so when we speak of making the people happy in very general terms, it also could detract from the seriousness of the purpose of governance itself, which is not to say that things are well. No, there are security issues, there's hunger in the land, the cost, the level of living is very high. But I want our conversations to operate at the level of what is it that needs to be done, rather than what is it that the people will be excited about. Secondly, or thirdly, and lastly, when you look at where we are, how we've traveled up to this point, you spoke of emergency leaders. As a matter of fact, but for irregularities in the general Nigerian political process, many people will not be in leadership positions today. Many people will not be in the National Assembly. Many of them will not be governors. So you cannot pretend that people who, you know, flew in when everybody was drugged she'll suddenly receive applause. Yeah, they are getting honors and all of that, but
right.
that element must not be must not be forgotten. That
okay.
yes, there are emergency heroes. There are heroes who arose because the processes were irregular, and these will eventually, with time, pass away.
All right, we'll have to say thank you very much. Professor Okey Ikechukwu is leadership and governance consultant joining us on Newsnet. And Mahmud Jega is Arise analyst. Thank you, both of you, for your insights tonight.